What's up, Nichols? J-Dog back for another goddamn interview. And today we got the fucking wizard of death metal, John Mcentee of Incantation. Does anyone ever tell you, John, you look like a goddamn wizard with the white hair?
I have been told that, especially when a beard was longer.
Yeah.
They used to call me Gandalf, a lot of people.
Yeah, it looks fucking awesome. Because I remember, like, there was a time gap, like, where when I saw you several times in the late 90s, early 2000s playing, and there was a gap. I don't know if it was 10 years or maybe it seemed like 10 years. And I'm like, what the fuck? John's like all white. But I was like, dude, it actually looks awesome. I was like, he looks like a goddamn death metal wizard. And then, like, I don't know if you say you watch my shit, which I doubt. I talk about all these fucking douchebags and shit going on stage in their shorts and baseball caps. And you actually had a goddamn, like, cool ass, like a different death metal image. What do you say about that? Like, am I incorrect on calling out death metal bands for wearing baseball caps and sports jerseys on stage, or?
I don't know if you're. I mean, everybody has their own opinion, I guess, on it, you know. So it's kind of hard to say. I mean, for me, obviously, I'm not into that style. I'm proud to be metal. I'm proud to look metal. I want to look metal when playing live. So it's very, for me, that's normal to want to do. I wouldn't feel comfortable having, like, I don't know, the Anthrax look or something on stage, you know, with the shorts, like baseball caps and stuff like that. Like, for me, it's, you know, it's not my thing. It's almost more of like a hardcore thing. But now with the way the metal scene is now, it's so integrated with hardcore and death metal with a lot of the newer bands. So I think that's just something that has become part of an area of death metal that's like acceptable. But it's always been there. I mean, you have the more Dying Fetus type bands and the brutal grind bands, like
even like a band like Suffocation. That crowd. Their early image, I guess they didn't have it, but that crowd. I guess what it is a question. Somebody asked me, it's like, take a band like Suffocation, because you're around the time, and I'm sure you guys played together tons and shit like that, starting similar years, putting out albums around the same time. Why do you think, like, those stompy fucking hardcore douchebag kids that, like, that literally don't listen to Seven Churches, like, but but to their defense, it seemed like they legitimately liked a band like Suffocation.
Yeah.
Why do they like Suffocation, but they didn't like other death metal? Like why? Like, do you have a guess? Like,
well, I think again, it's a segment of the death metal scene where they just want something that is moshable. And Suffocation, even though they're technical, they always have those kind of mosh parts to them and stuff like that. I mean, and that, you know, that has its own scene, and it's a bigger scene than, say, my scene of death metal, you know, where it's more into the vibe and the atmosphere of the music and stuff like that. There's way more people that would just want to go to a show and they want to just mosh and stage dive, and that's cool. And bands like Suffocation, especially with their moshier parts, or bands that followed in their footsteps with the moshier parts, like Internal Bleeding or something, those are bands that, you know, can cross over to a hardcore kid, or, you know, a kid that was into, I don't know, like a Testament or an Anthrax or something that isn't really into death metal, but when they hear like the jun 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 jun, you know, they could be like, oh, okay, and they can relate to that because, you know, it's definitely more groove, more mosh oriented.
Did you like any bands, for example, yourself in that style, like that you would actually physically buy a copy of? Like, I mean, I know obviously you're a fan of stuff like Autopsy and shit like that, but like a band like Suffocation or early Dying Fetus, any of them, like, was that ever like, I actually like this record, like that's something I would buy? Like, I'm sure it's very few if there is, but was there any? Or you're just like, I just don't like it at all?
Most of that kind of stuff I'm not a super big fan of. I mean, I would say for Suffocation even, I didn't really start to get it until around Despise the Sun. I heard that, and it kind of opened my eyes up, because early on, you know, we were friends in the scene and stuff like that, but yeah. I was like, you know, I always looked at it, okay, you know, we're all part of this death metal scene, but we're a different thing, you know? Yeah. We're trying to accomplish different things with our music, and it wasn't on my top list of bands at the time. But once I heard Despise the Sun, I started to realize that I might have, judged them wrong and threw them into that more grindy, moshy stuff. when the riffs on that, especially that album, really, I really thought was awesome. So yeah, Despise the Sun, I bought that one, and that kind of opened me up to them. And I kind of went back and started listening to some of the other ones, and like, oh yeah, it's actually pretty good. Like I was a real elitist asshole back in the day, and it's like if it didn't sound like Autopsy or like have that rough edge or like Immolation or something like that, I wasn't interested in it at the time. But you know, we've done a lot of stuff with Suffocation now, and it's fucking. They're an amazing band, and I've really learned to appreciate that style a lot more. But there's not a lot of bands in that general style that I'm really into. I mean, my taste is more of a late 80s, early 90s stuff like, I don't know, the Massacre demos and the like Kingdom Come demos. That's the stuff that I really, really enjoy. You know, the Necrophagia stuff.
Speaking of, what is in your book then, I guess by maybe back then when you picked it up, and also by today's standards with the subgenres, what do you consider Repulsion Horrified? Death metal or grindcore?
Who's that?
Repulsion Horrified?
Yeah.
Do you consider that a death metal record or a grindcore record?
I would call it, it's like a pre-grindcore record, you know, but I think it's grindcore.
That's what I think, yeah.
I would call it,
now,
yeah.
you liked that, right?
Yeah, Horrified's fucking great.
Yeah.
I mean,
because when I was talking about early death metal records like that, some people put in the comments like, "Well, Horrified." I was like, well, I specifically didn't say that. I was like, that's one of my all-time favorite records. I was like, I always considered like a grind record. And then some people come back and like, yeah, but back then that wasn't really a term. It was just called death metal. I'm like, okay, yes, back then, but that's literally like saying people were calling Slayer death metal back then. You really wouldn't use that as today because people think death metal. You literally think, either Incantation, Immolation, Cannibal Corpse. That's what people think death metal is. You don't put Slayer, but people are like, wait, what? This doesn't sound anything like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, those terms were way more liberal back then than they are now. I mean, a band like Slayer would have been called sometimes black metal, death metal, speed metal, you know, thrash, death thrash, whatever. So, and a lot of the bands, because even though I was later into the scene, like, you know, with Revenant and like
later
87 or 80.
Well, yeah, it's funny. People think, dude, some people are like, your first show was 1998. Oh my God. I'm like, talking about it. I'm a fucking newbie. John's saying he's late to the scene.
I'm late to the scene.
Yeah, he's late to the scene.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, what was I saying with like even when I was starting with Revenant, like we were calling it, sometimes they're calling it deathcore, you know, death metal, death thrash, you know, even like grinding something. Like we would just use these terms to just try to describe, because we didn't really know, it wasn't solidified what each individual thing was, so we just kind of used terms like that. So I think it got messed up. People now look at it in the same way you looked at it then. You can't. You have to look at it like that was more of almost like a mixture of styles. People are still trying to find their place, so you can't use the same way of looking at the segregated styles of death or of metal now to then, because things weren't as segregated. We were all kind of influenced by a lot of the same stuff. We were influenced by a lot of hardcore, a lot of you know, early thrash, some of the death thrash, you know, the bands like Exciter and I don't know, Merciful Fate, you know, and the demo stuff like, you know, Death and stuff like that. I mean, that was considered, I guess, death metal, but people would still call it something else or whatever. Like it wasn't, I guess it wasn't really like a thing. It actually kind of it started to become a thing once Earache and Roadrunner started putting out those albums. They started classifying it as like grindcore and death metal and kind of defining it. Before that, I don't really think it, at least on where I was at in New Jersey, it wasn't really defined 100%. I mean, I know Immolation came out and they were pushing it as death metal, and I think that was accurate. And when I started Incant, I pushed it as, like, I would mostly say like brutal grinding death metal or Black Death or something like that, we'd call it. But in essence, it really is just death metal. And when I look back now, at that time, we used grind in our style, but we were also influenced by grind, so it felt like a natural thing. You know, there's bands like Napalm Death and Carcass and Repulsion. That was all influential and part of it's kind of like a smorgasbord of stuff that made a lot of the death metal bands that came out on the Roadrunner and Relapse and stuff like that.
What do you feel about Immolation as a band now? Because it's kind of like, I've always looked at you two guys. You're kind of like not in competition by any means, but you're the two bands that have been around similar time frame. Both have several albums. You have none of this "we're back" shit, like left the scene and we're back. You've been consistently around.
Yes.
All have well in the double digits albums, and you both were that kind of like more mid-paced, slower, darker death metal. And both are kind of like around the same size. You're not Cannibal Corpse big, but you're also not fucking at the bottom of the barrel. Like you're towards the top of anyone that's in underground death metal. At least if they truly are, it's not some fucking poser fucking saying they are. They've at least heard of both of you guys.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, how do you feel? So. I mean, how do you feel about that? Like you guys go what do you feel about Immolation? Like it's like you I don't really like their later records. It's cool they're doing their thing. We're doing their thing. We think we don't really have any affiliation. Like, because I always just look at you not as one, but just the two similar bands. I guess
there's a lot of connection between us and Immolation. I mean, we hung out a lot, and we were influenced by a lot of the same stuff. And actually, Ross Dolan was the one that told me about Paul Ledney to start off Incantation when I was
and Paul Fanatica's playing tonight.
Yes, exactly. That's cool. So we're all kind of like from the the same scene and stuff. So, and yeah, I mean, I'm an old school dude, so of course, especially Dawn of Possession it's always going to mean a lot to me, and that's 90% of the time I listen to Immolation, I probably listen to that album just because it's sentimental for the time period. But I mean, I think it's great that they continue to play, and they came up with their own original way of doing it. I think as time went on, it got more, I don't know what the right word is, abstract or dissonant or something like that, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, they grew as a band into something, that I think a lot of people relate to. And I like the new albums. I think especially the last 3 albums, I really liked a lot. I mean, but when it comes down to it, I listen to Dawn of Possession the most. I mean, usually when the album comes out, I'll listen to it a couple of times and really dig it, but I can't help it. I always go back to, but I think that's just the way, I'm an older dude. I grew up, I like that early 90s is my sweet spot. Like when I listen to music a lot of times, I want to enjoy the nostalgia of it. I want to remember that feeling I had when I heard it for the first time and stuff. And I don't get the same out of almost any band's new album. It's not on purpose.
Well, the thing is, I've talked to so many people, and I've been over this conversation a million times. Guys much older than me, some of them are a little bit older than you, some of them in between age. I've concluded from mixing that whole goddamn everything I said and just what you said, it's literally what you heard between ages 13 to 16 or so. That's what's going to stick with you for life.
Yes.
So it just is. It makes sense. You're the most impressionable. It's new to you. So of course that's what you're going to take. So it's not just you. It's all the kids of today, when they're hearing, some might be Incantation, first death metal band they're getting to. They're going to be like, the best album is fucking the Vanquish album.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because that's just what they heard first.
It's funny because, when I speak to older school fans, like that were around at the time, they have their album, the first album or something is going to be the one, Onward to Golgotha, to be their go-to because that's where they got into us. That's what hit them, that made them a fan. But then, we have people at whatever album they happen to pick up, they'll be like, this one is the first one I heard, it's my favorite. And it just depends on the age of the person, I mean, a lot of people will go back and listen to the early albums, but usually the special one is that first one you hear, like you said, as a kid, that made you a fan, because if you heard one of the albums and you didn't like it, you probably wouldn't be a fan to check out the other stuff, Yep.
But that being said, is out of you talking of your own band, Incantation, I know everybody there always like, I don't know. Let's just let me rephrase it like this. Someone paid you $1 million, you got to put it in writing. What is your favorite album and what's your least favorite album? Let's say you had to put something on paper. What's the one you're most proud of? And when I say favorite album and not least favorite, that doesn't mean what performed the best sale-wise, not fan favorite. What do you like the most, and which one are you the most disappointed? Like, shit, I wish I would have fixed it, for whatever reasons.
Okay. I'm just going to go with the main discography, not the side stuff, because there's a lot of side releases.
I would say on a full-length album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
My favorite Well, my least favorite, I know that.
Okay, which is that?
That's Infernal Storm.
Well, why is that your least favorite?
Because I think I know the album wasn't vetted enough. Like, we didn't practice it enough in the rehearsal room while doing it. And Dave Koros did an amazing job on it, but he did it as a session member. So he came in. I went to Florida and recorded and demoed the stuff with him, and I felt really good about it. And I can't remember. It must have been like 2 or 3 weeks later. He came up my way, and we were going to practice and go right into the studio. And he went to the studio. When we went to practice, he didn't know. He forgot like all the stuff we practiced already. So he just had these notes and was like, "Okay, it's a blast beat here. It's a slow part here," and I felt really uncomfortable doing the album that way, like because I was so used to playing with either Kyle or Jim, where we would jam the songs out, and we get a vibe going, and it felt more personal, more passionate that way. So it went doing it, having a drummer just come in, and he played it great. I mean, his playing was top notch, probably the tightest stuff we've ever done, but it just felt sterile. It felt weird, the whole
It's funny
thing.
because like that's not my favorite album, but it's one of them. But again, when I heard that album, right?
Yes, I know.
It was I don't know what year that came out, 2000, 2001?
Yeah,
so I would have been 15 or 16. Well, plus,
I remember seeing you guys.
Yeah, but I doubt you remember this. You know that when the first time I met you, like, do you know where I met you the first time?
Was it at that place in...
Well, plus, do you know what you were doing the first time I met you? Because it wasn't with Incantation.
Oh, was it Immolation, maybe?
You were playing on the Failures for Gods tour, and I met you in the Flying Machine, Lorain, Ohio. I was like, why is Mcentee from Incantation here?
Yeah.
I was like, because I'd expect, because it was a ghost town. People don't understand back then. I explained it to them. I was like, even bands like Incantation, Immolation, I was like, not that you guys are huge, but you're significantly bigger now than 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Like you go to a show, there's way more people. I mean, would you say that's an accurate statement or no?
No, it is. There's definitely a lot of more people into the style of music. There's a resurgence. It slowly happened since like the mid 2000s. It's been growing and growing. For some reason, it's gotten to like a...
I have a theory about that.
Yeah.
Did you hear what it is? Because you say you watch my shit.
I haven't watched the one with the theory of that, so...
My theory is when you do the math, in my opinion, for simple rough numbers, as far as albums, death metal started with 7 Churches, 1985. Personally, if you want to get really technical on my personal belief, I think it's with the Mance's demos, Death by Metal, 84. But regardless, around 84, 85, 86, right? When you rewind to, like, say, 2000, around like an album like Infernal Storm or so, it's only 15 years old. That is only, in the age frame of things, It is a teenager. Death metal is now, I was born in 85, year 7 Churches. It is now 39 years old. It is catching up with the masses. When death metal first came out, or extreme metal, think about it, it's almost like shell shock to anybody. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
It is now, and it's in adult years. Think about another 30 years when it's a grandpa, a grandfather. You know what I mean? It's going to be more, it takes time for anything brand new. It's going to take time for everybody to want a Tesla that fucking self-drives. You're not going to convince everybody, like, dude, what the fuck, I want to drive my own car. But 60 years from now, the chances you're going to be driving around a gasoline car is slim to none.
Yeah.
It takes time. That's my theory as to why it's growing.
I know it sounds like I'm being egotistical or something, but it's not. It's just from my own notice. I just noticed this, is the bottom line, is that when we were doing some of the stuff we were doing, a segment of the metal community was just not ready for it. I mean,
I can see it. Yeah.
I don't want to be a dick. I'm not saying that we're better, but because we were just doing what we wanted to do. It was like it wasn't like, okay, this is what's happening in the scene, or we want to play death metal. We didn't want to follow the trends. We always wanted to just do our way, and we paid a price for that. Because we did like, especially with our second album, people were like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But
they didn't like it. Mortal Throne. They didn't like it when it first
came out. It was a massive disappointment.
What? Well, that was a little bit before my time. Like, what were people saying? Like, what did they like about it?
They just didn't get it. They thought it was just too the production they thought sucked, which it isn't good. I get it.
That record sounds heavy as fuck.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, but I think people weren't just ready for how dark and how muddy and the atmosphere of it all. Like, people wanted to hear the straightforward, They wanted to hear that the bands that had the really tight picking, like a more of a Mars sound type sound or something like that. They didn't want to hear something that was more of a mixture, maybe, but where the atmosphere was, say, just as important as the riff, the technique, or the technique and the vibe was just as important. But most people are looking at that time, they're really into technique. They're really into like the, I don't know, just all the stuff that came out, like especially like Roadrunner stuff. It's good stuff, but it's different than us. It's tighter. It's tighter death metal. It was made with a totally different vibe. It wasn't going into like trying to do these exaggerated, agonizing parts to the songs. It was more about keeping that. Most bands doing more of the just the faster picking stuff. Like we didn't even really think about like picking styles and stuff. We would just play the riff and be like, oh, it sounds cool. Let's get a drum beat for it. Let's just throw it all together and make a song that like means something from beginning to end to us. And I just think people weren't ready for that at the time. But it's crazy because about 2005, I started hearing bands like Dead Congregation come up, and they were like, praising our Blasphemy album and our Mortal Throne album as being, big influence on them. And things started taking off from there. And these bands started taking what we were doing and bringing it into their own thing, which is unexpected as fuck. Because we were just like, okay, we're doing this band and it's always going to be a really small segment that are going to understand it and like it. We were okay with it. And then all of a sudden, all these other bands started coming out. And even if they didn't hear about us through us, they heard about it through them, because they'd either be talking about it or they would hear what their influences were and look back at what their influences were, and they'd hear us and be like, oh, fuck, and we started getting bigger because of it,
Sure, yeah. No, 'cause there's definitely a lot. I mean, as Hell's Headbangers, you listen to a lot of shit bands come through. There's a lot of like what I call incantation clone bands.
It's crazy. It's impressive because back in the 90s, it was mostly Suffocation and Cannibal Corpse clones.
Yeah. Yep.
And now, and really for the last 15 years, there's been a lot more incantation clones.
100%.
And it was really odd because at first I felt really uncomfortable with it, because I would hear these bands and they would sound good, but it would be weird for me to hear, because I had never really heard many bands before like Dead Congregation and that whole wave of incant style bands. It was only Drawn and Quartered and Hybridus Mortis that I really heard that really sounded like us, and I thought it was cool that they were doing it. But once I started hearing a lot of bands doing it, it actually started shying away from it, because it's weird. It's almost egotistical to want to listen to bands that sound just like the stuff we do all the time, because why? It's like, I'll just play the riffs if I want to hear them, or we'll play it as a band. It's not as enjoyable for me. It's enjoyable for me to hear bands that are maybe taking it far enough away from us where it makes it interesting. Or I'd rather just listen to other styles of death metal, than listen to bands that are too highly influenced by us. It just for me, it's just awkward and weird. But it's great at the same time they're doing it. Like, I'm happy that they're doing, because as a songwriter, it's a extreme honor to have bands be influenced by riffs that I wrote or we wrote as a band. So I'm flattered by it, but at the same time, it doesn't really, it's not my enjoyable listen. Like, if I watch the band play live, it's cool, but I'm not going to go home and listen to a band that sounds like Mortal Throne Nazarene.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah,
it'd be silly,
And plus, you guys play all the time, and
hell yeah.
You guys have played everywhere, and you guys got to be the death metal band, the established death metal band. Not that you probably have more lineup changes than any other band. Did you say that's an accurate assessment?
Yes.
So is Mcentee just a dick, or is he hard to work with? Well, or is he a go-getter and everyone else just sucks? Like, what is it?
The easy thing is I'm a dick.
Yeah.
And let's just put it this way: I'm not the easiest person to work with, especially if you're not highly motivated. Because I'm a highly motivated person, and that's
what I assume.
I push people hard, and especially when I was younger, I didn't really know I was highly motivated. I just thought everyone should think like me, and everybody should want to have that ambition like I have and that passion like I have. And I just couldn't comprehend. It was it wasn't even ego. It was more just like the go out and get it thing, where it's like you want something, you want to create some music, you do whatever it takes to do it, and most people are attracted to that in the beginning.
You don't want to do the work though; they're lazy.
But then once they get in that situation, they realize why I'm in the situation I'm in, and they're like start getting whoa, you know, like don't push so damn hard on stuff, you know. And I'm not the easiest person to work with, but then we have someone like Kyle.
He's been in the band a long time.
Yeah, and it works good with Kyle because Kyle is a hard worker like myself, and he has no problem coming up and talking to me and telling me like chill the fuck out or whatever, like relax a little bit, you know, or he'll come up with, we'll just say, when he tells me something that I'm doing that is like I'm pushing too hard or whatever, you know, I got to chill out. He gives me reasons why, or he gives me facts that I can look at and be like, you're right. Because most people, when I push them too hard, they just get pissed off at me and maybe call me an asshole and say I'm a dick. But Kyle, if I'm pushing too hard on something, he'll come back and be like, this, you know, pay attention to that, you know? And I can respect that. Like, I want to work with other strong people that are willing to tell me that sometimes no on things, because otherwise I'm going to say yes to everything and we all like work on this retarded schedule. I mean, you know, when we were doing the Onward to Golgotha stuff, you know, I mean, we had a strict schedule of practicing. The one time I remember Jim Rowe had tennis elbow, and I was thinking to myself, like, is this guy really a tennis elbow? Is he like want to fucking like not practice tonight? You know, like that sounds retarded. You know, and
that thing exists.
And then he goes on the phone and he does like this little squeezing, and I hear work. He's like, that's my fucking hand. You know, I can't practice. I was like, okay, that's legit. You know, but you know, at the time it was just I was focused like a laser. It wasn't about focusing to be successful. It was focusing because music, to me, expressing myself with music, or not even the music I write, but just with music I love, was the most important thing to me. And I just thought in my brain, every single person that, you know, would want to do this, like, why wouldn't you want to be in a highly motivated band with somebody that wants to work hard and push you to work hard to be the best you could be? But it's not that. A lot of people do it as a casual thing.
Yeah,
or
as a hobby, yeah.
You know, or people, you know, they have different ideas. And I go down a rabbit hole. Like, if I get focused on something, it's like I'm not moving from that. You're like, I'm like, this is how I want it, and you guys are here because you guys want to do it the way I want to do it. And I'm open to their ideas, but they have to give me good ideas, and they have to also sometimes fight for the ideas, especially back then. Now I'm a nice guy. I'm way more easy to work with, but in the 90s, especially in the 2000s, I was a bitch to work with in the band. I could see why people were annoyed at me. At the time, I couldn't understand it. It actually was really depressing, but now it's like, I see totally why, you know. I mean, I probably wouldn't want to, if I wasn't 100% dedicated like I was, I'd be pissed off too. Like, why can't we just play some music with our friends and have fun and kick ass? And there's nothing wrong with that, but that wasn't me back then. You talk to, even when I was playing in Revenant, those guys, I pushed those guys too hard too. Like, even though they were bummed out I left, they were also probably relieved that like they don't have me on their back all the time. Sure. Bothering them, you know?
Well, having said that, I'll actually finish it off with this so I don't take up the whole goddamn day. John's got more to say than I thought he would.
I'm sorry about that.
No,
I always talk a lot.
Those are my favorites. You know, you don't got King Folly beat yet, though. That guy don't shut the fuck up. So they make it easy, because usually I'm me thinking of everything. Because I didn't even pre-think any of this shit. I just think of it all the time in my head. So I was like, it makes my job easy. Well, having said that, I've been asking the older guys, like a Corpse Grinder I'm going to ask Glenn Benton, if I get that goddamn interview, don't fuck me tomorrow. Ask the same thing. How long do you honestly think you will do this? And keep this in mind, like I told Corpse Grinder, a lot of guys, I look at guys like yourself or him, the reason you probably will stop is I'm kind of like an athlete. Not because you want to, it's you're forced to retire for whatever reason. Health, physical, can't do it. I mean, I get the vibe, I could be wrong. Kyle kind of the reason he doesn't want to do the touring anymore is because it's just
Kyle's retired from touring.
Yeah, but it's probably for similar reasons. I'm just getting too old for this, bro. Whatever the case may be. Having said that, how much longer do you think realistically you can and will do this?
Yeah, I mean that's hard to say. I mean, there's definitely going to be a limit to the level that I could play at, and I think it's just going to be until wherever that time comes where I feel like I'm not performing at the level that I want to. But I honestly didn't think I'd be still doing it now. So I look at it, everything for the last, say, 10 years since we did Vanquish and Vengeance. I feel like I've been living on borrowed time anyway, like because I thought that after Primordial Domination that we were probably done as a band. I just didn't see that there was any future to it. So since Vanquish and Vengeance, and I had that fire back in the band, jamming with Kyle, Chuck, and Alex. It really everything else has been like an added bonus. Like every day I wake up and I still get to play metal, I'm like, this is a good day. I get to fucking play metal and kill posers, So I think, and I think probably until I die, I'm going to be writing music, unless I can't move my hands to play guitar. But I'll probably still be doing something music-wise, because music for me is not just about doing the band, but it's about self-expression. So even if no one hears it, I'll be doing it in the background or something. But I don't know. I mean, I'm 54 now, I think. 53? I don't even know. When you get this old, you don't know.
What year are you born?
Yeah. Oh, I was in December in '69. So, yeah.
It's going to be 55 this year.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, I mean, how much longer can I do? Like,
well, hey, dude,
65?
George, he's like, I got 10 years left in me for sure. He's like, that probably means 15. That's what Corpse Grinder said.
It's hard.
I'm like, you're gonna be doing whirlwind headbangs on fucking stage at fucking 70, bro. Oh man, that's gonna be awesome. So he says when he goes, I interviewed him at your fest.
Yeah.
Yeah. He even said he's like, when he goes to get a massage, he don't let him touch his neck. Don't touch the neck. That's the moneymaker. Oh, that's fucking great.
George is great. Fuck yeah.
Well, so you mentioned killing posers. We'll end it off with here. If you don't want to say, might not, or you don't have that. Who's the most annoying ass fucking poser metal band you can't fucking stand? Then, since you said it, not me, gotta like these fucking posers.
Who's the most poser
channel
band?
That loves the poser talk. That's why I bring it up.
Fuck.
Like for example, I think Pantera is gayer than hell. That's my opinion, and people know that.
Well, that's fair to say. I mean, I really don't like Pantera. I never liked them, but they were a newer generation of thrash, and the reason
I annoyed them is because you knew me, you met me young, right? Literally, I'd be wearing an Incantation shirt. Specifically the first Incantation shirt I bought was Diabolical Conquest. I bought that, the CD from Relapse Records. I'm wearing that in 9th grade, and you'd have these dumbass fucking high school kids that said, "Dude, what's heavier than Pantera?" And they never heard it. They never even heard Cannibal Corpse unless Incantation.
Yeah,
that's why I thought they were annoying. I didn't know if there was somebody maybe from the '80s, like a hair metal poser band that you hated. Pantera was mine because those were the kids that came up to me.
Well, the problem with that is that if you would have asked me 25 years ago, I could have told you a bunch of bands in the 80s that really, sucked, I hated or whatever, or posers. But now, because there's so much crap music out, that stuff isn't as bad to me anymore.
You're like, it's me and Don had that discussion once. When Don was working for us for about a year, he was checking shit out. I'm like, you don't like this, you don't like that. He's like, you know what the problem is, dude? It's like, I go back to spiritual healing and stuff. He's like, I thought that shit was terrible.
Yeah.
It's like, with music now, he's like, it's so watered down and shitty. He's like, I go back to these albums, I'm like, it's actually not bad.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that the standard was, we had a higher standard back then, and we didn't appreciate the fact that some of the stuff that we thought sucked could actually be pretty good. But the fact, when you start listening to a lot of stuff that's coming out in the last 20 years, even more, especially with the new metal stuff, it was just like, holy crap,
that stuff's really bad.
That's worse than the poser stuff of the 80s, So you start going back, Spiritual Healing is a good example, because I remember being so bummed out when that album came out.
Is that a death metal record? People ask me.
No. I didn't think it was.
Told you, motherfuckers. Even the Wizard of Death Metal called it. Goddamn it. Spiritual Healing Up is not death metal. Goddamn it.
They changed it. They went from death metal to like a tech death.
That's what I said. It wasn't.
But spiritual healing is like a interesting in between spot because it's not quite as technical as they were going to be.
Yeah.
But it was definitely like they took the good gore stuff and the aggressive part of death metal. They took that away from it. You know.
100%.
I hated that album when it came out. I was so bummed out when I first heard that little riff that did a little. I was just like, no, you know. But now it's funny because now I listen back to it. I'm like, it's actually a pretty good album.
I went back to the same thing. I dismissed it when I heard it as a teenager because there's no gore and shit like that. Yeah. Didn't like it, but yeah, listening now, I even picked it up. I'm like, it is a pretty good record. It's like it's their worst record as far as good ones, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't consider
it's still not that bad.
Yeah.
But look at it from Don or myself situation. We grew up listening to the Death demos.
Yeah.
Then we were like, Scream Bloody Gore came out, and it was like, yes, you know, finally this happened. And then Leprosy came out, and it was still good. It wasn't as good as Scream Bloody Gore, but it was still good.
Okay,
and then Spiritual Healing came out, and it was like each one went like a lower level of death metal and started rising in the more technical area, you know. And in my opinion, I always thought after Spiritual Healing, they maybe should have changed the name of the band from Death to Human. I actually ripped that off from Chris Ryford. He brought that up to me back in the day. And I was like, that's right.
We can get Ryford on camera too, but I don't think he's going to do an interview. He thinks I don't think he likes me.
I'm sure he likes. He's a great guy.
He's here because they play today or tomorrow, right?
They play today, yeah.
Yeah, the entire Summer Survival.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's be totally fucking awesome, yeah.
But yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the interview. I didn't pick my favorite Incantation album.
Ducking me on that one, goddammit.
I just didn't. I don't want to be a weasel and just like have it be an oversight. My favorite one. It's hard because it's a toss up between Onward to Golgotha because
that's my favorite.
Of doing that album, it meant so much to me. It's like my favorite albums are more personal than they are the songs on it because all the songs I like all the songs we have pretty much, but it was either Diabolical or Vanquish and Vengeance because that was like a refresh. It was so refreshing to play with Kyle, Alex, and Chuck. It gave me inspiration in life when I thought like after Primordial I started to get a little discouraged that maybe I'm never going to find people that are going to really want to move the band forward and stuff, you know, and I didn't want to. I was sick. I was tired of pushing people, like But after that album gave me new life. But I still have to go with probably Onward because it was the first time in the studio. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing, and somehow it came out. It was a good collaboration of all the music that everyone wrote. I mean, we have Paul Ledney stuff. We have Sal Saggio stuff. We have Jim and Craig and Ronnie stuff on there. It's like really a great collaboration of everything from my Revenant time up to, the first album. That was a special time for me.
Yeah, sure. Makes sense.
Plus, I never thought I'd do a full-length album, Even when we started Incan with Paul Ledney, we're just like, we'll put out a 7-inch, everybody will hate it, and we'll probably just...
You were like, what, 17 at the time? Like, when you and Ledney were playing together, how old were you?
That was 19.
Okay.
I was 19. Okay. Yeah. And I had a blast jam with Ledney. I love Ledney. He's so great.
Yeah. Yeah. He had his pants on at the practice?
Most of the time, yes. The one you have to worry about his pants coming off was Aragon.
Okay.
Aragon.
Keep an eye on him, huh?
Yeah, he would. But it was funny. I have to tell this story, and forgive me, Veg. But when we went to try him out for Revenant, that's how I got to know him first. I tried him out for Revenant, or we tried him out for Revenant. At the end of the practice, I mean, I thought it was great. I was so happy. Henry had a different opinion on it. But we're outside and we're talking. He's saying, "Oh yeah, I'm all excited. Like, yeah, let's do this again." Henry was kind of a little bit standoffish on it, and I didn't realize. But Paul was like, had his hands inside of his sweatpants and playing with his dick, like scratching his dick and touching his dick and stuff while we're talking, and Veg was like horrified by it, And I was like looking at. I didn't know what was. I was looking at him up here, And I guess Henry's seen him It was just kind of it was just pretty funny that after he had his hands on his cock or whatever, he goes to Henry, he goes, okay, I'll see you later. And Hank was like, I don't remember what he said, but it was something like, fuck that.
You should have pulled Jim. I'll give you a Kanye story right then. I think it was Eric. Goes out there, Jim's fucking just got out of the bathroom or something like that. Goes to shake his hand. Elbow butt, just touch my dick.
That's great, yes.
All right, Don, is there anything you want to say, promote, or finish it off? You want to advertise? Anything coming up to us?
Advertise. Okay.
It's yours, floor's yours, and we're done.
Okay, let me take out my notes. No.
Tour coming out, albums, EPs, anything?
Well, when's this going to be out? How long will it take?
Probably a week, a few days.
Okay, so we're on a tour now, but you'll probably see this too late to go to a show. So we're going to be doing another tour in Europe coming up, a bunch of fests. We're playing like Vakken and Brutal Assault and a bunch of killer shows. So any European fucks, come out and get your head crushed. Besides that, most of the next fall and stuff's going to be not too much going on because Charlie's, who's doing drums for us on tour, is going to be touring with Ascended Dead and also Morbid Angels. So he'll be busy, but it's good. We get a little bit of a break, and we're going to try to spend some of that time by getting our web store that these guys are doing for us updated because I've been too busy to fucking really get organized with that. So, yes, hell yeah. So
get your ass out to those goddamn shows, goddammit.
Don't be a poser.
Yep, later.